Arise, brother.
Consciousness coalesced inside Brother Diavy's mind. The thunder of war, the ever-pounding booms of explosive bolts that dictated the tempo of battle was gone. He was no longer planet-side. The noxious fog that the enemy had surrounded themselves with had been so utterly thick, so pervasive that even inside his armor he had been repulsed by the stench. But it was all gone now. Crisp air flooded his lungs. He could taste the disinfectant in the air, hear the humming lines of power that threaded through the room, feel the rumble of engines and equipment.
Arise, brother.
That voice, it demanded respect. It knew neither request nor plea. It simply stated and received. Diavy was not one to refuse such a voice. Opening his eyes, he saw the skull looming above him, shadows cast in dark contrast from the rest of the apothecarium.
Brother, stand!
Something felt different. Out of place. Had his vestibular system been damaged? No. There was no dizziness. The last thing he could remember had been the Havoc missile arcing down on his position from the enemy's Hell Talons. He should be dead. By the throne, he shouldn't even be here. But no. If anything, he felt haler, heartier, mightier, despite the agony ripping through his skeleton. One look down at his body told him that he had been hit. Yet more than that.
You have been remade, brother, in might reforged, clad once more to serve the Emperor's will.
He swung his legs off the apothecarian table. The difference in height was startling. To one so used to being a giant among normal men, or at least average among his peers, it felt strange.
To feel the Emperor's technology at work is a strange feeling indeed, brother. It will pass.
What? What happened?
Can you not see? Is it not plainly obvious before your eyes? Does the might of terror now burn within your heart once more? You have joined us anew, brother. Once you were of the Emperor's original plan, an Astartes, our firstborn. You stand among us now, clad in his new shield against the dark, the bulwark against our enemies, brought to us from terror itself by his holy custodians. You are stronger, faster, mightier. You are the new generation, our future, our hope. You are a Primaris, my brother, brought across the treacherous tides of the Rubicon by his will when all thought you lost. Now tell me, brother, do you answer?
It is not a question. It will never be a question. Only in death does duty end. Welcome one and all, I am Azazel, and for better or worse, you have stumbled your way onto my video detailing the differences between Primaris and Firstborn Space Marines. Firstly, we'll cover the basics of what a Space Marine is for those of you arriving new to the hobby, and swiftly cover the main differences, followed by an anecdote or two as to the consequences of Primaris Marines across the Imperium. For just as the Primaris Marines are a saving grace to some, to others, they are naught but blasphemy. With that said, let's dive in. Be prepared now. Steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. The place where hope goes to die and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions, while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 41st millennium. What is a Space Marine? The Space Marines of the Imperium of Man are humanity's greatest defense against the evils of a grim dark universe. They are scattered across its various worlds, guttering flames of light surrounded by the encroaching darkness. And while to you or I they may seem like demigods of war, their foes are equally as, if not more, powerful. While they may be 8-foot tall, genetically enhanced transhuman warriors, clad in the most impervious of armor and girded with the most deadly array of weapons and technologies known to mankind, so too do their enemies wield vampiric warp craft, or stand as behemoths of teeth and chitin that dwarf over them, or are simply just as good. So while you may be slaughtering the Xenos and the Heretic in Space Marine 2 as easily as Mario collects coins, do remember that the Imperium's enemies are not to be trifled with, and many are the literal stuff of nightmares. But where did Space Marines come from? Well, for the Cliff Notes version, the Emperor of Mankind happened. For he, the powerful, nigh immortal human being that he was, had a plan. To protect humanity and our future, he would need to reunite all the fractured settlements of mankind across the stars. Those pinpricks of life in a horrifying and lonely universe needed to be found, brought in, and forged as one. One Imperium beneath one Emperor. His rule. And yet, fierce in form, a wielder of psychic might echelons beyond even humanity's greatest psychers, and with millennia of experience in manipulation, politics, and plotting, the Emperor could not be everywhere. He needed generals. But not just any kind. Human generals would not be able to face down the horrors of a galaxy, and the few who could would fade away eventually. He needed immortals, generals whose lifespan would ensure a continuous effort for humanity to safeguard it through the ages. Ones whose physical and mental fortitude would be unshakable, unbreakable. And so, with the help of other perpetuals, he created the Primarchs. They would be born of his genetic code, and one other, whose name we do not mention. They would have their bodies gene-crafted and designed for the most Herculean of tasks. Their souls would be melded with, or entirely formed from, that of the warp. They would be varied in skill. Some would be able to elude even the most fastidious of minds. Others would be conjurers and wielders of psychic might. And others would have minds formed to strategize, plot, or facilitate. But all would be like nothing ever seen before in the history of the galaxy. Now he would, inevitably, lose those Primarchs, but that is another story. Link in the video. From these 20 beings, so meticulously constructed were they that they had 20 unique genetic templates. And with these genetic templates, 20 legions of Space Marines could be born. Each and every Space Marine can trace their lineage back to a Primarch. Regardless, traitor, loyalist, renegade, they all descend from a Primarch template. Now many chapters may have lost that specific knowledge, and their specific Primarchs remain a mystery to them, but the point still stands. With that knowledge in mind, that these ferocious superhuman warriors are all influenced by the genetic template of a single being, we shall focus on the process of creating a Space Marine. Or, at least for now, a firstborn Marine. Space Marine recruitment and creation. There are approximately 1,000 chapters scattered around the galaxy fighting the Imperium's enemies. Comparatively few are listed within Imperial records. Some lead an endless crusade through the stars, only stopping to make war and bring down the Emperor's wrath upon the enemy. Others base themselves on a planet and guard a sector or subsector as patrolling wardens. Others, too, are based at galactic chokeholds to keep unknowable horrors imprisoned within their cages. With that said, the differences between Space Marine chapters can be minor or completely disparate. However, there are a few rules that Space Marine chapters abide by when it comes to recruitment. Firstly, all aspirants must be male, as were the Primarchs, and in early adolescence. Between the ages of 10 to 14 is ideal, yet as with everything in 40k there are exceptions to rules. However, for the majority of chapters this is the sticking point. Secondly, they must be genetically compatible for the chapter's gene seed. Don't worry if you don't understand gene seed just yet, we will get to it down below. But for now, simply understand that this is, in simple terms, organs that hold within them the genetic template of each chapter's Primarch. With each Primarch being distinctive in their templates and humanity so widespread and diverse, it isn't a one-shoe-fits-all kind of deal. Each aspirant must be genetically suited for the chapter. Thirdly, they must be fierce. They must be strong. These aspirants have to be the best of a generation. For becoming a Space Marine augments everything that a standard human is, yet it is time and resource consuming. It cannot be frivolously wasted on the unworthy. Few pass these trials, and those that do must be brave, cunning, resourceful, and enduring. Fourthly, and this isn't by any means a necessity, they are watched for spiritual purity. And by this I do not mean not a murderer. In fact, having killed men at age 10 is quite usually an asset for any aspirant, and indeed something that Space Marine chapters enjoy having. No, it means something more. For you can be the strongest fighter, the quickest and most cunning creature in a generation, physically capable of becoming a hardened warrior. But if there is a sliver of rot in your soul, then it is unfeasible. Those with a sliver of cowardice, who are confident and brave in their arena, yet outside of their comfort zone flee in terror. Those who are morally corrupt and of all the makings of falling to the temptations, depravities, or desires of chaos cannot be trusted to become Space Marines. Funny that, despite how rigorous the recruitment process is, how many chapters have fallen to chaos? But those are some other stories. So here we have our aspirants. They have been located and are well on their way to becoming legendary warriors. They are the selected few. They will be tried and tested. Challenges of endurance, of hunting, of bloodshed and battle. This induction process is not merciful to the candidates. Most will fall short, either due to lack of conviction or weakness of body. They will be whittled down, one by one. Each chapter has their own regimen, so let's take a look at the physical changes involved in becoming a Space Marine. Space Marine Organ Implantation. What does a Space Marine have that you don't, apart from unbreakable willpower, rippling muscles, and the ability to leave the house without suffering crippling anxiety? Well, organs. Lots of them. Well, 19 to be exact, which is a fair amount of extra organs to have scattered around your body. Do you remember those Primarchs that we mentioned earlier? And that term, gene seed? Well, that gene seed, created from the blueprint of each of the Primarchs' genomes, is used to create these organs. Most of these extra organs are grown in a lab from the genetic material and implanted piecemeal during an aspirant's recruitment process. Not only this, but vast amounts of surgeries and chemicals are required during the implantation processes for aspirants to survive. We could list off each and every organ, but let's not. If you are new here, there are a couple that you should absolutely be aware of. There is the additional heart that all Astartes have, along with a third lung in case of an emergency. One organ called the osmodular allows the skeletal structure to vastly increase in size, fuse together and harden. The omophagia allows Space Marines to glean information, knowledges and experiences from the flesh that they consume. It's very dark, I know, I love it. The sus-an membrane allows Space Marines to withdraw into a catatonic state in cases of extreme injury, in order to prolong their life until suitable medical aid can reach them. The Betcher's gland allows Astartes to spit acid, and the black carapace is a bio-interface implanted in their chest which allows them to directly interface with their armour. But the most well-known, and possibly most important of all, are the progenoid glands. These glands respond to the existence of the other organs within a Space Marine's body. They gestate and grow until they can be harvested years later, and then used to create more gene seed. These are the most vital, because it is the closest a Space Marine will ever come to reproduction, maintaining the sanctity of his chapter's gene line. And also the most terrifying, for if a chapter loses their progenoid glands, then soon they will go extinct themselves. However, when it comes to gene lines, I should mention that many chapters and gene seeds have degraded over the millennia, to the point where many chapters are unable to produce or implant certain organs. But that's a tale for another entry. Now, those are the basics for creating a Firstborn Marine. But what do Primaris Marines have that Firstborn do not? The differences between Primaris Marines and Firstborn Marines. Well, since you're so very recently acquainted with the 19 organs of Born Astartes, let's start there, because the Primaris actually have 22. Or 21 in a little cybernetic spice. You'll understand soon. Primaris Marines are gifted with sinew coils, durametallic implantations that support and reinforce an Astartes sinews, affording them greater strength and hardened defense. This one isn't technically an organ, but it is a defining feature for the Primaris. On top of this, they also have an organ called a Magnificat. No, it's not just a really good kitty. This organ amplifies some of the other organs that a Marine already has, most particularly those of growth and strength, giving Primaris extra height and might. And finally, a Primaris Marine also contains a Belisarian furnace, an organ that provides an organic stim boost, a hyper cocktail infused with drugs that allow Primaris to be better. Their reactions improve, their strength increases, rapid regrowth of tissue and muscle ensues. This organ is triggered by massive amounts of physical trauma or stress, often being able to turn a losing fight into a winning one. Their difference in size and strength has required new weapons and new armour to be created to fit transhuman warriors of their incredible stature. Upgraded Mark X power armour has turned formidable armies into near unstoppable ones. As Chaos has pushed back against the Imperium and rent it in half thanks to the Cicadrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, so too does the Imperium push back now. Its new Primaris Marines rushing in to reinforce chapters devastated by losses, to recreate chapters whose noble ends deserve a continued legacy, and to create entirely new chapters to stand against the darkness. But how did the Primaris project begin? I fully intend to go into details of this at a later date. The main character behind the Primaris, the greatest son of Mars to ever stride the galaxy, the brainpower behind 1,000 new inventions and prime conduit of the Omnissiah, deserves, nay, demands his own attention. For now, you may simply know him as Belisarius Cole, an archmagus of the Mechanicus of Mars, one who walks the line between tech heresy and technological advancement very vicariously. Now, Rabute Guilliman is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Lord Commander of the Imperium, Master of Ultramar and the 500 Worlds, the Avenging Sun alongside a score or more titles. However, before that, in the aftermath of the Horus Heresy of the 31st millennium, he was a grieving father, a mourning brother, and a sorrowful son. Half of his brothers had turned traitor. Some of his loyal brothers had been struck down. Scores of his own sons lay dead, scattered across the stars, and his father sat interred upon the golden throne, a corpse, kept from true death by human sacrifice. It was a dark time, an age of horror. In that time he made a request, for the Imperium that once was in tatters. It needed more. In those times, Guilliman commissioned Belisarius Cole with a task: to improve upon what was built, to enhance the warriors of the Imperium, to build on the vision originally pursued by the Emperor himself. He shared with him plans, schemata, and information surrounding the creation of the Astartes, and included a few remnants of the Primarch project itself, and something called the Sang Primus Portum. After that, well, Guilliman and his brother Primarchs became lost. The Imperium devolved into spiritualism, regressivism, taboos, and fear. Until the end of the 41st millennium, until the return of the avenging sun from his eternal death trapped in stasis. Rebute Guilliman returned. In an exquisite display of progress, Belisarius Cawl appeared before the Primarch with his new creations. Not simply a display of design theoretics, not merely a few prototypes, he had created legions once more. Thousands upon thousands of Primaris Space Marines, his ships filled to the brim with legionaries in cryostasis. Those aspirants gathered from across the Imperium spanning the last 10,000 years, some of whom even remembered the aftermath of the Horus Heresy itself. Each Primaris, mightier than the previous generation, quicker of reflex, swifter of thought, one step closer to becoming indestructible. Not for 10 millennia had such an army been brought to bear. But the Indomitus Crusade and the Unnumbered Suns are for another time. Suffice to say that hope appeared in the Imperium once more. Well, hope it appeared to be for some. For others, it was heresy, blasphemy, apostasy, and abomination. But we'll get to that in just a moment. For now, we have covered the two Space Marine breeds, the Primaris and the Firstborn. But let's discuss how a Firstborn could become a Primaris Marine. How one could cross the Rubicon and become something called a Rubicon Primaris. Yes, I know, very inventive terminology there. Also, for newcomers, don't confuse Rubicon and Rubric, entirely different things, very different Marines. For, as the reinforcements arrived to bolster the Imperium's defenses, and smaller parties dispatched to bring the gift of Primaris and the secrets of their creations to chapters lost among the stars, debate arose. For excellent in physical form they may be, but the Primaris had not been tried and tested in battle. They did not have the same instincts that the Firstborn had carved into their psyches through fire and blood upon battlefields across the galaxy, facing foes of pure horror. Firstborn Marines were warriors to their very core, but they lacked the new additional implants that brought about such phenomenal gifts. Could they be combined? Could you take a Firstborn Marine and turn him into a Primaris? Was it possible to take a lauded and celebrated hero of the Imperium and make him even more? Cawl, in his arrogance, said yes. But can we really call it arrogance when he is almost always right? The theory had never been tested, but there was little over 60% chance of death during such an operation. For a Firstborn Marine would have to be sliced open, his entire body. On the brink of death, the moment when life fails within the biological system, the new implants must be installed. Lifeless on the slab, the Marine is stitched back together and shocked with violent bursts of electricity to kickstart his heart. At that moment, the Belisarian furnace should kick in, bringing back life to the lifeless and triggering the newly implanted organs. Such an operation, with a 6 in 10 chance of dying, and even successful surgeries causing agonizing bone and muscle growth for months and years to come, could potentially kill valuable warriors. But it needed a test subject, one to be the first of a new breed, a bridge between the old and the new, of experience and vigor. Chapter Master Marnius Calgar of the Ultramarines took that chance. And against all odds, it was a success. Since that time, the Rubicon has become safer and safer to perform, but it is never an operation to be taken lightly. Many who undergo such an operation do so for other reasons. Some are near death. The Rubicon operation and the Belisarian furnace their only chance at surviving wounds of terrifying proportions. Others do so out of symbolic reasons, or in an effort to gird their physical bodies. As with everything 40k, I could go down rabbit holes, wax lyrical about the whys and wherefores of decisions, plans, and stratagems for hours, but I promised myself that this entry would be more to the point, so I'm gonna save those for some other entries. But how did chapters react to the introduction of these Primaris Marines? With gratitude, surely. These were a gift to rejuvenate their numbers, reinforce their dwindling Marines, and bring new strength to those suffering due to a sheer number of enemies among the galaxy of the 41st millennium. If only it were that simple. The Brazen Drake's Primaris Marines were sent to reinforce their chapter. This small fleet, under the oversight of the Custodes, as always, arrived at their new chapter's homeworld, only to discover ruin, wrath, and a ravaged planet. Heresy had taken root and flourished on that world. The Primaris Marines were commanded to surrender themselves. Despite not having met their chapter, they were to be apprehended, and the sentence calculated. In protestation, the Primaris Captain Geryon bellowed about not knowing the facts. Perhaps even then, there were loyal sons of the Brazen Drakes down there fighting for their chapter's honor. Tensions rose, and the Custodes need no excuse. Slaughter came for the Primaris Brazen Drakes, damned by a chapter they hadn't even met. In another arena of the galaxy, the results were far worse. The Angevin Crusade, one of the Black Templars' ever-crusading fleets, accepted their new Primaris reinforcements. They were the Emperor's new gift, and even High Marshal Helbrecht, the master of the Black Templars, had approved their integration into the Black Templars' ranks. However, in an army of the zealous, of the fanatic, fervor reached its peak. A mutiny occurred. Puritanical Black Templars overthrew Marshal Angevin and slew the Primaris reinforcements along with any who supported their integration. These Primaris were seen as heresy, as false, as deceitful, the beginning of a long road to damnation. Others have been accepted with open arms, and more still have had to prove their mettle. Gabriel Seth of the Flesh Terrors pommeled the Primaris captain into the ground until his face was bloody and torn upon first meeting him. But with that chapter, it is nothing unexpected. War is upon the Imperium from all sides. It suffers under the baleful gaze of the Great Rift. It is in jeopardy from the machinations of Vashtor and Abaddon. Traitor Primarchs stir in the shadows, gaining in aggression with each passing year. The souls of humanity are leached away in an ever-growing nexus controlled by the Necrons. The hordes of the Tyranids grow greater with each wave of hive fleets. To have gained these incredible Primaris warriors is a boon, a miracle, a lifeline of a chance. But in the grim darkness of the far future, there is still no hope. Only the slow denial of defeat. The final battle cry in the dark. A last defiant stand against the oncoming end. With that said, thank you for listening. Giveaway warning, once I reach 1,000 subscribers, there will be a giveaway, so do click the notifications bar if you'd like to be ready to grab that prize. Do please drop a like and a comment. I adore feedback, both complimentary and critical. For without you, no one would be listening. Now, do enjoy your day or night, and I hope you've indulged in some escapism from reality, for that's why we are here, isn't it? Until next time.